Hi, you've reached the Signal Watch. Film, comics, television, sci-fi, superheroes, noir, history, and more. Join us as we examine cultural artifacts of the 20th century, boldly explore the 21st, and try to put it all in perspective. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Steens. Stay tuned. We're gonna try to make this work. Hi, and welcome back. As always, I am Ryan Steens.
And upon occasion, I'm Amy Cavender.
And today we're going to cover a completely different kind of movie.
Thank God.
Yes. Last time we covered 50 Shades of the third movie. This time we are talking about what?
Black Panther.
Black Panther, which is based on the Marvel comic, originally developed as a character in Fantastic Four by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Has had several series over the years. I can talk a little bit about that. I've read some of those comics over the years. I went through my index to see, what I still had in my long boxes. So I can't speak authoritatively, but I can say I own, about 100 Black Panther comics and, trade paperbacks and whatnot. So I'm happy to talk about it from that perspective, but that's not entirely what we're doing here today. What is our theme, Amy?
We weren't really sure what the theme was, but I think that perhaps our ongoing theme for certain movies will be movies that are not made for us, but we watch them anyway.
Right.
And that's not to say that this was not a movie that could not be enjoyed by us, because I think it was very much enjoyed, but...
I will be very curious at the end of the weekend to check Box Office Mojo. Last Monday when I last checked in, it was over 700 million that's pulled in worldwide. I think we'll probably by next weekend hit $1 billion if things stay relatively on track. People are going back in and for 2, 3, 4 viewings of this movie. I myself have seen it twice now.
Yep. I've only seen it the once, but I did go on opening night, and or the opening weekend. I think I actually went on a Friday, not a Thursday, but I can't remember for sure. It might have been the Thursday. But, I think that one of the reasons why I was so excited to see it was because I like to be around people that are happy. Like, I like the feeling of being in a happy crowd. And I remember what it was like to see Wonder Woman, where there were just a lot of people who were like, oh, I've waited for this for so long. I'm so excited about this. This is so great. And that was a great room to be in. And we might end up talking about that more later. But I wanted to be in that room again for that feeling for Black Panther. And I got that.
Yeah, it's definitely different from other Marvel movies in that folks are kind of coming out of the woodwork who aren't necessarily into Marvel movies. I always find it very charming that people are like, oh, all superhero movies are the same. Also, and then they'll tell you, oh, I haven't watched a superhero movie since Batman in 1988 or whatever. And that's fine. People have their preferences for types of movies, but it's been really interesting to see some of even my friends say, hey, yeah, I am actually interested in seeing this one. But there's been all kinds of things around this. I know I was a little surprised when I got home from seeing it on opening night and saw this stuff on Twitter about were people dressed at the movie you went to. And in fact, there were a few people even at my super, crackery suburban movie theater. There was a couple that was wearing King and Queen t-shirts. There were people who were dressed in all black who were at the theater. I don't know if you saw any of that at your theater.
I didn't see a lot in the showing that I saw, but the people who were queued up for the next one were dressed. There were people in, I think the correct term would be a dashiki, but I know that might be tied to a specific culture that they may or may not have intended to tie themselves to, but they were wearing a lot of stuff that looked really elaborate and weren't just, J. Crew pants and a t-shirt from the Gap kind of thing. So that was pretty cool. And, that same week, we had, I work on a show called Nerd Night. For anyone that doesn't know about that, I'll talk your ear off about it given the first opportunity. I'll try to restrain myself right now. But after we had finished our February show, a few of us had gone out to drinks together afterwards. And one of the people that works on the show is African American. And he and I and one of the other nerd bosses were standing out in front of the bar waiting for an Uber to come, pick one of us up for a ride. And we were talking about what we were going to do for the rest of the week. And I said I was going to go see Black Panther. And Jaron, my colleague who's African American, was like, "Oh yeah, I'm really excited about that." And then the third person was like, "Are you sure it's going to be good? Like, what? Why are you excited?" And I was like, "Well, I mean, the trailers look really good, and it's a Marvel movie, and it seems like they've got a really good cast, and I expect the fight scenes are going to be pretty cool. So, I think it'll be a good experience." And then, my other colleague was like, "It better be good. This is important to my people." Like, he literally said that. And I was just like, yeah, I feel like this is the feeling that you're probably having right now is the feeling that I was having when Wonder Woman was coming out, where it's just like, I need this to be good. If this is bad, I will be crushed on a level that would be difficult for people to understand if they didn't love these kinds of stories. So, I get that.
Yeah, it was interesting to see some of the criticism I saw come out, a lot of just stuff on Twitter of, oh, this is a, boilerplate Marvel movie. People are giving it extra kudos or giving it bonus points for, all black cast, black director, story takes place in Africa. I'm like, well, right there, we've got a lot of different things than we normally have in a Marvel movie.
Yep.
But I feel like the story itself came from a different experience than what is normally shared in Marvel movies, in most mainstream action movies, which is whether you're talking about Schwarzenegger or Stallone, if we're going to go back to the 80s, if you're going to talk about more current movies, even, Bruce Willis has Death Wish out this weekend. It's, the white male protagonist, and there's a lot of things you can read into something especially like Death Wish coming out. But Black Panther really talks about really big historical, very real world issues. I'm going to pause right now because we have a special guest with us on the table today.
Yes.
His name is Scooter.
Yes.
He weighs about 10 pounds.
That sounds right.
He's gray.
Yeah.
He's very friendly, and he may walk in front of the microphone at any moment.
Right. So just brace yourselves. The beige house cat may have an opinion on the Black Panther. We'll see.
But yeah, so it covered, some different things. I do feel like the execution on it was in the top tier of the Marvel movies that have come out to date, which is interesting because that's also top tier of action movies that have kind of come out in a very, very long time. Yep. They're not really messing around with those movies. If you look at what the Russo brothers have done with Captain America and some of the other pictures, I felt like that this held up in the action sequences. The plotting was as complex. The characters were more complex.
Right. I would say that one of the things that elevates this movie, in my opinion, really to the top tier of the Marvel universe, was the fact that it wasn't merely an exceptional man does a good thing and then there's a couple other people standing around too. Like, there were a lot of exceptional people, and some of them were women, and some of them were exceptional and also bad, and some of them were, really good people who had done bad things, or bad people who wanted to do something good in a bad way. And it was like there was a lot of moral complexity there, and there wasn't just the whole one exceptional person does exceptional things.
Right, the Superman effect of he's a god living among mortals, working at the Daily Planet, where everyone's kind of, gee, wow, it's Superman.
Yeah.
You're right, and the Okoye and Nakia were both presented, and honestly, I was a little concerned. And I'm going to get into a spoiler here, that they would use the fact that there were two strong women to make one of them dead to drive his motivation into the third act. I literally just clenched my way through the first screening waiting for Okoye to get it.
Right.
And they didn't do that. Everybody gets an arc.
Yep.
Which is fascinating. It's a long movie.
Yeah.
But they did manage to kind of give every single character an arc. Even Angela Bassett's character, who doesn't have more than 9 lines in the whole movie.
Mm-hmm.
Even she has a little bit of an arc watching her son.
Right, exactly. She, we didn't see this happen in this particular film, but in the larger story it's part of, she went from being a queen to a queen mother when her husband died. And that's a different role.
Mm-hmm.
That's just it, that is a different, you're a different person the day that you wake up and your husband's dead if you're a queen.
Mm.
Because of the way that their hereditary sort of kind of monarchy by virtue of combat operates. She, but she was still queen. She still ruled stuff. She was kind of amazing, and she had those super red hats. Or headpieces, or whatever the appropriate term would be. But yeah, it was really the fact that everybody had a story in the Wakandan universe was cool. Killmonger's girlfriend, whose name I would only have known from looking at the IMDb, was barely there.
Yeah.
Which she was like really one of the few characters that didn't seem to have a character.
No, I mean, she was maybe on screen for a total of 90 seconds in the whole movie.
Right, I think she was there during the heist, and then she was there when they were talking with Claw, and then all of a sudden she was a human shield, and that did not work. Spoiler.
Yeah. I've heard there's a 4-hour cut of the movie. And I heard
want to see that, actually.
Yeah, well, apparently when Kendrick Lamar was asked to score the movie or provide music for it, that was the cut they had at the time, and he said it works totally fine. It's just 4 hours. And so, yeah, I think that, I'm not a release the Snyder cut sort of person, but I am a release the 4-hour Black Panther. I can do that in 2 sittings.
Right.
I'd be very curious to see all of this expanded out and learn a little bit more.
Laundry.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought I turned that off.
That wasn't Amy buzzing me that I was wrong.
We should have sound effects next time. It'd be great. It's a bunch of like boing and whatever. Yeah, it was. I would watch 4 hours of this happily, and that's going to make another $1 billion if they put that out. People would buy that, show it to their kids. It's actually, one of the things that's also kind of interesting about this movie as opposed to some of the other Marvel films that I've really enjoyed. You could have a kid watch this and it's not profoundly disturbing. There's nothing terribly graphic. There's more emotional violence than...
Yeah, I mean, there's the fight scene at the very beginning, which is all in shadow, and it's kind of done in the ninja style. And catch me if I miss anything. And then there's the chase sequence / kind of fight in South Korea that has a little bit of a follow-up then at the police station. And then there's really kind of the big final fight, the multi-point, we're doing the Lucas thing of 3 things happening at once. That works very, very well, by the way. Much better than I've seen other folks try and make that work. It's seamless. Everybody's actions are all impacting each other and getting us all to the point we need to get to.
Maybe the art gallery.
I guess
that was
yeah.
a little splattery, but I think like maybe a 12 or 13-year-old could handle that and not
Oh yeah.
completely lose their mind, because it was like TV level violence, but it wasn't particularly gory or dwelled upon. It wasn't the point. You know, I'm whenever I think of Marvel movies and superhero movies now, I always have to give a moment's thought to Deadpool, which literally had a campaign of like, Deadpool's not for children.
Right.
That was one of their advertising campaigns, which was extremely appropriate.
Yeah, and I heard lots of stories of people having to carry their children out and various other things who had ignored that campaign and just saw superheroes. It's a superhero. Or I didn't notice that. I just bought 2 seats. But yeah, so Black Panther has, we'd alluded to a little bit earlier, has these kind of cultural things tied in with the real world, and that's something that, you know, kind of starting with Iron Man, we get this divergence from our real world back to, you know, then they insert backstory of, oh, S.H.I.E.L.D. was here and Captain America was here, but they've tried to keep it somewhat grounded in reality, if you can ignore the fact that there's a helicarrier, you know, flying around and whatnot. What they haven't ignored in this movie in particular is the history of the African diaspora. And that is the incredibly sympathetic driving point of Eric Stevens / Killmonger, played by Michael B. Jordan in the film. I remember Killmonger from the comics. I was never particularly enamored with the character. He was always this kind of mullety, you know, kind of clenching his fist into the sky. I will defeat you, T'Challa, sort of bad guy that I always kind of thought was one note. But that's one of the great things about the Marvel movies is they're, you know, they kind of take it up a notch. They're not having to write for 8-year-olds, and they provided this incredibly sympathetic viewpoint in a way that certainly not the Captain America movies have provided. But I was really impressed by that. That was a different level of writing.
Right. Well, and I think that one of the things that made, you know, let's credit where it's due, one of the reasons why Killmonger was compelling was because he's played by Michael B. Jordan, who in his non-evil actual life is just incredibly charismatic and, you know, decent and wholesome and apparently quite delightful, you know, at least as far as his public persona goes. And I recently rewatched part of Chronicle, which, you know, one of his relatively early appearances, and you know, it's easy to palate evil. You know, it's easy to you know, give somebody a pass if they're cute or charismatic, which I think was kind of a genius casting decision on Coogler's part, was to be all like, yeah, I want to take this like really like, you know, affable, wholesome, charming person and just let him go full on genocide. Because we're used to seeing like facial scars and eye patches or some kind of radiation burn or something. There's nothing wrong with this dude. He was just a fine example of a person that got horribly twisted by their circumstances, but not deformed, disfigured, or rendered unpleasant in a manner.
It was. I wondered why, because in the Marvel comics, Wakanda has always known to be there. They've played it much more of during, or at least starting with the Reggie Hudlin comics. The colonists couldn't get past basically the wall of Wakanda, which was the crazy high-tech stuff that was, you know, wiping out the Bengal Lancers as they tried to come through. And so that was always kind of the deal with Claw, was kind of the first guy to kind of penetrate those defenses. And it wasn't so much that it was a secret, it was that you just couldn't get in there. And they knew something was up behind those walls if they could do all of that. And so I thought it was odd that they did this as kind of Wakanda's a secret, until they rolled out Killmonger's whole motivation. And the same question would have been there. I think it frames the question a lot better of, why didn't Wakanda take steps? What have they really given the world back by shrouding everything in mystery, by not sharing? What did they do for their neighbors during the era of slavery? We'll say the 1500s through the 1800s. And what could they have been doing for people around the world since? And that's his honestly noble question and mission and aspiration. And that's the interesting thing about the journey that T'Challa's on, because he's clearly got that same question. They're the same coin flipped in, which is always, the Marvel way. You've got to have your evil opposite. If you have your Captain America, he's got his Red Skull. But this one feels much more natural. It's a lot more organic.
Right.
Because you can sympathize. You're never going to sympathize with Red Skull. You're never going to sympathize with Obadiah Stane in the Iron Man movies wanting to, weaponize everything and kill everybody.
Right. Pure power with no underpinning other than I would like to be powerful, thank you. And by thank you, I mean I'm going to stab you in the face. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that it was really compelling about seeing T'Challa and Killmonger go at each other, was the fact that, no one was completely right. It was a question of methods and desired end result, but the question is definitely valid. And it's also a question we should all be asking ourselves to some extent, because we live in a very affluent, powerful country, and we know about all kinds of things that are going wrong all over the place, and what is our obligation? In some of my more socialist moments, I'll kind of sit here and be like, everything I own is covered in blood, and sitting on stolen land, and blah, 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 blah. I try not to dwell on that too much, but those are thoughts I have from time to time. And you have to wonder what your obligation is as far as helping people who are being exploited, helping people who are being, harmed for either your benefit or your convenience. And I know with Wakanda, I hadn't really read a lot of the comics, but I think that one of the things that they did as far as portraying how they were concealing themselves with, all this kind of mesh technology and whatever, it's kind of interesting, because I find myself wondering, in that cinematic universe, if it had been visually covered for a long time, or if they did that in response to spy satellites.
I
The
had
creation.
the same thought. Yeah. We better do something. They've got stuff up there when Sputnik went over. Yeah.
Yeah, how tall did their 1970s era defenses? What did they do? But yeah, and I think that the other thing that's kind of a mitigating factor with their the question of whether or not to intervene outside was that they're not exactly a unified nation.
Right.
They're portrayed as, 5 tribes?
I think it's even more splintered in the comics. I've lost track of how many, but yeah, they kind of boiled it down to 5 key tribes.
Right, and I think that's to the extent that there's any ethical cover for kind of keeping to themselves. It's probably that they aren't an entirely homogenous, unified monoculture. It's 5 different entities that are federated, and dealing with each other. And I guess that could sort of be a justification for keeping yourself to yourself, but it was a little unsatisfying, especially considering they had the option, of not giving weapons, but giving education, or giving, defensive weaponry, or, defensive cover.
And that was kind of at the end of the day, after they've had their almost near civil war, etc. You really see how close T'Challa and Killmonger were, in that they both end up doing an export. They both are going to reveal to the world what's going on with Wakanda. It's just T'Challa buys the property in Oakland, and he's going to set up these community centers for outreach. That's degrees of difference, as you said. I mean, it's an interesting tag to the end. It seems like, it's a good guy thing, and you could let that kind of slide by. But if you think about everything they've kind of been saying to each other, and what T'Challa's had to say in the ancestral realm back to his father, which all of that, I want to get into kind of the father stuff too, but your ancestors then end up being the bad guys, and so the question is, what are you going to do going forward when you start talking about your personal experience and everything's paid in blood? How did we get to this point? You got to break free from that and figure out how you're going to move forward instead.
Yeah, because I really like having a cell phone. I really like having a laptop, but yeah, it's problematic, and to a certain extent, life is problematic. There's always going to be, something has to die so that other things may live. Even if it's just a spinach plant or something like that, but it's still worth being mindful about where you expend your energy and where you expend your power.
The opening sequence is, I can't remember Eric Stevens' father's real name. I'm not going to pretend I do. But there, he's been sent as this war dog, which are kind of these spies that are sent out from Wakanda, and he's become radicalized by witnessing this experience, and he's fed some of this back to his very young son and told him all about Wakanda, and one day he'll take him there. The spirit realm experience that Killmonger ends up having when he goes to the ancestral plane takes him back to that apartment, and that was just heartbreaking for me when I was watching it. That was as far back as he could see, was that apartment, and he couldn't even really come to terms. He was having the same experience that T'Challa was seeing T'Chaka, and that they're having a real conversation, but his father saw where this path of fury was going to take his son, because he knew what had happened to him. And I thought it was really impactful. I kind of wish one of the things that had gotten stretched a little bit more for T'Challa were his interactions with his father on the ancestral plane, because that was so damn good. that sequence in the apartment, in the spirit realm. I do also want to talk about Shuri a little bit.
Yes. Let's.
I was trying to tell Jamie before we got to the movie, I was like, I think you're really going to like Shuri. I think they did this really right, because I've enjoyed Shuri in the comics for the past few years. But that was better than the comics. That was really, really fun.
I am very much looking forward to seeing little girls dressed up like her for years to come. Or little boys,
Mm-hmm.
Or little days. It's all good. But tiny humans dressed as Shuri is going to be my favorite thing for the foreseeable future, because oh wow. She's so great.
They were selling the little Panther gauntlets that she had at the end as toys at Target.
Good.
Yes. I'll be curious to see if I see kids running around wearing those things. But yeah, she's such a great character. I mean, she's got the same kind of like Q job as in the James Bond franchise, but and Q of course always gives James Bond a hard time. She, there was a little bit of that, but with the playful sibling vibe to it, and the sheer genius of everything this character is kind of brought into the world, was a lot of fun.
Yes, and it was so. I think that my favorite thing about her was that she didn't question herself at any point. Like, there was no tortured moment of, am I actually a genius? Like, no, I'm cool. I'm actually a genius. Everything's great. Check this out. That was really nice to see someone kind of embrace their gifts like that. Because, I think that we've had this conversation offline before. So many people, I've had this conversation with many people, I think I've had it with you as well. It's like, so many superheroes seem, or super gifted people in, portrayed in cinematic universes specifically, seem so miserable about their gifts. It's like, oh, it was so hard for me, meh, 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 I can fly, meh, 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 it's so difficult, wah. No, she is having fun with her brain. And she has practical applications for things that she would probably just be messing around with anyway if she didn't have a practical application. So that's nice. But she just seems to be having fun learning and doing and making things. She's not tortured, not ambivalent, not troubled.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, all that's very true. They never went for the what would have been in a different screenplay, probably. And I kept thinking about 15 years ago what it was looked like, because I kept thinking about Wesley Snipes had come very close to getting a Black Panther movie off the ground, and how would that have worked at the time? I mean, I think one, it would have been 10 minutes in Wakanda, what was clearly sound stages, and then they would have, done a Coming to America, and he would have been chasing Claw through Los Angeles, or someone doubling for New York for, the rest of the movie until maybe the very last minutes of the movie. And I think you probably would have seen that, like, oh, she's a genius, but she's unsure of herself. Yeah, and I definitely think they would have whacked Okoye or somebody along the lines to, you've got to have that motivation.
Yeah, somebody's going to end up in a fridge. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, they didn't, and that was great. And Shuri just seemed to be really happy, well-adjusted. The closest thing that we saw to a point of tension is that she didn't really respect tradition that much, right? Which was, literally called out in the movie. And it's like, yeah, she's wearing a corset in the sun, and it's like made out of leather. I get it. That is uncomfortable, or so I hear. So anyway, it was like that was it. That was the tension in her life.
Yeah.
And having to think of sassy things to say to her brother about his shoes.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see, because there's no doubt there's a Black Panther 2 and 3 coming. That seems to be the Marvel pattern, is wrap them up into the Avengers, and then but we'll also do 2 sequels and then move on to the next character, and that's great. That's how we got Black Panther. And I will be curious to see from what they have done with her in the comics. At one point, she took on the mantle of the Black Panther when T'Challa was having his personal "Am I Good Enough" moment, and she'd be a very tiny Black Panther. She'd be, it'd be interesting to see. And then I don't want to spoil it for anybody. Recently in the comics, they've done some really interesting stuff playing off the fact that she kind of wasn't super into all of the traditions.
Yeah.
So that would be great.
And that was actually an interesting counterpoint. Like, she was very like, let's do whatever works, tradition, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I want to get back to what I was doing. But for a lot of the other female characters in the movie, they were the holders of tradition. And the people that really like kind of tightly, regulated the expression of, what it is to be a Wakandan, which was really interesting to me. You saw this big tension with Okoye about, like, what do I do here? Do I honor, my role as general that serves the throne, or do I go for the person, do I show for the person who's obviously not going to commit genocide?
Right. And it was that nice moment between soldier and spy when she and Nakia kind of voiced that tension.
Right.
And it was a great resolution to that at the end of the film. They did not get into, in the comics, I've been reading her forever, and I still can't pronounce the Dora's second half of their name.
Milaje or Milaje?
Yes, I will say that's what it is.
Dora Milaje, right?
Dora Milaje.
Let's correct us if we're wrong in the comments.
Right. It's the same way you will not get me try to pronounce Thor's hammer's name. I just can't do it. There's too many consonants too close to it.
Ish. Y'all.
But they give me a Kryptonian word, and sure, I'll run with it, because they're anyway. But they're
vowels.
Can handle that. In the comics, there's a suggestion or a direct statement early on, I think in the Christopher Priest run, that is where T'Challa traditionally, or T'Challa, the king, would have picked their bride from. Right,
which would explain why he kept on trying to get Nakia, like, hey, what do you think? Hey.
Yeah.
You should probably do that, hey.
But yeah, so it's an interesting tying in, like as you said, the keepers of the tradition, they're protectors of the king, and also going to help carry forth the bloodline, etc., etc. I don't get the feeling that the T'Chaka family is big on losing those battle for the thrones that have occurred. You get the feeling that's been a lot of kings straight back without losing to any of the other folks who could have challenged them.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, it was a lot of fun. It's hard. This is a lot more fun to talk about than kind of suffering through and getting that low grade headache I got at the end of talking about 50 Shades Freed.
Yeah, like it just one last little kind of thing that I think was interesting that I wanted to bring up. I know we've been talking for a long time, but one of the things that I've been doing a lot of reading about this after the fact, because there's been a lot of really great writing and a lot of really great conversations about this movie. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting was about the, is there a real life Wakanda, and what does that look like if there is? And I think that there's a stereotype of Africa as a continent being treated more like a country, and that country is poor. Mm-hmm. And that's not really a accurate assessment, because there are very wealthy Africans that have genealogies stretching back a long time, and they have all this context for who they are, their family history. If they if their country has any tribal history, they have an awareness of where they fit into that. And so they have, in some ways, they do have the kind of Wakandan experience of knowing, like, this is where I'm from, this is where my father was from, this is where my grandfather and grandmother were from, et cetera, all the way back for many, many years. And that's, they had the opportunity to buy back their cousins, and they had the opportunity to help at various points in time, and they didn't really do that. Which is not me casting aspersions, because I could have done a lot of things that I didn't do too, so, here it is, here we are. But it was really interesting to see people writing about, Africa as a continent with different countries, that people who are still there view African Americans as rootless, or without gravitas or value or connection.
Interesting.
And not having a right to be there, or to come back, or to lay claim to any aspect of this kind of unknown heritage that they don't have access to. So this movie was kind of a micro version of a macro conversation that could be had about, what does it mean to have been removed from your ancestry and your culture and everything, and have no way to get back? What must that feel like? So
that is very interesting. The movie's had appeal in the stateside, obviously. It's also apparently playing very well in Africa, which is great. I don't usually pay attention to African box office. I generally pay attention to US and China, and that's about it. Because those end up impacting Marvel movies, and I look at Box Office Mojo once a week. So it's interesting to hear about that. It's been interesting to hear how the little issues they've taken with the movie of, like, well, everyone's using kind of a different accent, throughout the movie, which I'm oblivious to as I'm watching it. And I'm, but they're also trying to posit Wakanda as this intersectional country of there's a reason for it, and partially those different tribes and the different ethnicities within Wakanda. One of the things that I love that happened in the States, and talking about identity and how you relate to it, and where this movie's kind of fitting in. Interestingly, you said, well, you could take a kid to it. Well, I dumped money at more than one charity that was looking to give kids a box of popcorn, a soda, and a seat at Black Panther. And that's not for me to pat myself on the back. I was so thrilled that they were doing this.
Yep.
What a great idea. A lot of kids, my mom always taught in schools with kids who didn't have as much as we did. And I was very aware that most of the kids in her class had never been to a movie theater, maybe had never been to a shopping mall that had a movie theater. And so that was something she often did with her students in the summer, was take them to a movie or two. Kind of made the rounds. And I'm not entirely certain if those kids will say, "But am I from Wakanda?" I don't know exactly how they're going to react. They had very kid reactions when they interviewed them afterward. Of T'Challa's cool, he punches bad guys, as you would expect. But as they grow up, I don't know how I thought about Luke Skywalker or Han Solo growing up.
But were you a rebel or were you a part of the Empire?
I was always a rebel.
Damn right. So I don't think places have to exist for people to be affiliated with them.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of looking back and getting that representation that the characters had, and the ability to fantasize about that. Yes, of course, it looks more like me than Chris Evans does. But also just the rich tapestry of this world that they just threw onto the screen, and being able to place yourself within that, and knowing you can exit and come back to it, that it's always going to kind of exist behind you. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. I think that there's a lot of power in having this idyllic place with enough complications to make it seem real, but this idyllic place for someone to aspire to be part of. I want to see kids wanting to be engineers. I want to see kids going into maker spaces. If I had the funds, I would straight up buy a bunch of places in Oakland myself and make little maker spaces and all that kind of fun stuff, because I think that's the power of the portrayals in this movie, is that it's people using science while not letting go of everything before, which is beautiful, because there are a lot of things from any culture's past that should be let go of, but there are a lot of things that have some value if you hold on to them, whether it's aesthetic value or spiritual value or emotional value, whatever you want to call it. It's still valuable. We don't have to let it go just because we have lasers. Right. So I think that's really, really beautiful. I think that the thing that we would have to just hope that people don't do is get all caught up in the kind of flash of it and forget about the heart and compassion that should also be there.
My favorite thing that I saw online after I saw the movie, I think it was the second time, was that thing on Twitter someone had posted of, if you're a bad guy and you have a lot of problems, Black Panther will sit with you on top of a mountain and listen to you talk about your problems, and that is the dopest power of all.
Agree.
It is, and that was something that I loved in Civil War. At the end of, he started on this path of vengeance, and that's how he ended, was due process, but also listening to the guy. Why had he done what he'd done? And his relation was so close, both not just blood, but in thoughts, with Killmonger, that did same, and it was a really, really good moment in the film.
We are probably well beyond our runtime at this point, but one of the things that, given that they were so equally matched in so many ways, imagine if they had grown up together. Imagine if T'Challa's father had not abandoned a child. We don't even know who raised him.
Right.
At this point, he was a child of Wakanda that was just left. But imagine if they had been raised together. It feels like such a tragic loss, and I wonder if that loss is felt in that universe. But given that they were both noble sons of Wakanda, they were both obviously very intelligent, very capable people. It's just so sad that he got left and had to raise himself, and then ended up raising himself the way that he did.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there. The 4-hour cut, that's what we need.
That's right. I need to know who raised that kid. But at any rate, it's such a great movie. Yeah, it is.
and hopefully we'll get that 4-hour cut. Hopefully we'll get a sequel. I'm sure the sequel's on the slate. I don't know how it wouldn't be with $1 billion rolling in on this, and I have no idea what all those Lexus commercials and the toys I've seen at Target and other places have generated for them. I know it's no small amount of money. There's not many toys from Black Panther still hanging on the pegs. If you haven't had a chance, I highly recommend checking out the current run on Black Panther by Coates. That's the writer. Brian Stelfreeze, I think, is the original artist. It's moved on to Chris Sprouse. It is a fantastic run. It's got the same level of maturity, if not more, even than the movie had. And if you want to see some interesting stuff play out, I definitely recommend those first 3 slim trades. I think it collects the first 12 issues or so. But with that, I guess we're gonna sign off. So.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, Ryan.
Well, thanks for having me, and thank you, Scooter. You've been so good during all of this. I was waiting for Scooter to come rub his face on the mic, and he never did.
Yeah, maybe next time.
All right. Thanks, everybody. That about wraps it up for this edition of The Signal Watch, a production of the League of Melbotus. I've been your host, Ryan Steens. Thanks for sticking with us. We'll be back soon with more exceedingly high-quality content. So until next time, God damn it, babies. You've got to be kind.